Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
So thanks so much for joining us today. We have Melanie Born with us. She is the owner of E.D.A. Public Relations and works with public relations and brand communications. So I'm super excited about this conversation. Melanie works in the travel area, and you guys all know that I'm a big traveler. So I'm super excited to hear all the exciting things that Melanie's done. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Mel, we'll start out with my favorite question, which is I love reading. What is your favorite book?
Me too. So yeah, I'm a book a week, sometimes two girl. And I don't think I can pick just one, but what I can say is one that I've read in the last couple of years that really stuck with me, that I think about even today, is called The Midnight Library by Matthew Haig. Uh-huh. And essentially it's a little fantasy, but what it's about is if you had access to, like, it's a library of your many lives. It's based on someone's unconsciousness when they're about to die. And then they get to look at books of what their life could have been had they made different choices here and there.
Oh.
And so it goes from being like a financial planner to like a rock star to a librarian. It's all of these different lives based on just slightly different choices and decisions, which I think is something we can probably all relate to. If we had done this one thing just differently, how would that have changed the course of our life?
Yeah. Oh, that sounds so interesting. I wonder what I would have been like if I were Taylor Swift. That is the one I want to read.
I know. So maybe there was a turn that you could have taken and you would have become Taylor Swift or been the first version of Taylor Swift.
I probably would have had to learn how to sing first.
Well, I mean, who knows?
I love the idea. I think that's great. I'm going to put it on my list. I'm coming up with so many different ideas of things to read, and I enjoy listening to all of them. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get where you are? What do you do? Tell us why you're so amazing.
Well, so I kind of took a twisty, turny road. I grew up in Iowa in the middle of nowhere, and I currently live just south of Los Angeles. So, it's been quite a big shift from where I grew up to where my kids are growing up. But I was in college. I was a college cheerleader, and I was just super into that world and was working even for the National Cheerleaders Association, which is this organization that oversees all of these competitions and things that you maybe have seen on TV.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I'm going to go down that path and maybe I'll become a teacher because then I can, coach cheering and this is my path. And then I blew out one ACL knee, one knee. And I was like, it's okay. I've got this. And sure enough, I beat the odds and came back 3 months later instead of the recommended 9 months. And, my doctors were so excited and my physical therapists were so excited. And then I blew out my second one maybe a week later.
Oh, no.
And they told me it was so bad that I could either keep cheering and not walk when I was older or be done. And so, sometimes, as is the case with life, we get kind of a door closes and we maybe panic for a second and we're forced to rethink everything. And this happened my junior year. And I had been on track to become a speech and theater teacher. Mm-hmm. Then I was sitting in the classroom after my second knee surgery and no longer cheering. And, my friend group had changed because your friends in college are very much around whatever your activities are. Right. And, so it was a team environment. And then all of a sudden I didn't have my team. And I was like, okay, sitting in a classroom. And I thought, this is so boring. and this is not an insult to teachers. It actually makes me appreciate them so much more, that they can be inspired every day and deal with kind of kids that we all know that can be difficult and or just not want to be there and still just push and push and push. But I just knew that I wasn't going to be one of them, because my inspiration hadn't probably been teaching, which is never the way you should do it.
Yeah.
So I went to my counselor and said, what do I do? Like, what do I do? I still want to graduate on time. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, you have a lot of communications classes that can translate into a communications degree. What do you think about public relations? And I said, I don't know what it is. And he said, you can get done in 4 years. And I said, great. So that's
Great. You major.
That's how I got on this path of public relations. And what's funny is now, decades later, I am one of the only people that I know who graduated with a degree and stuck with it, even though I had no idea what it was. And that's because my senior year, I was doing a project for one of my classes where we were told that we needed to reach out to a public relations firm and interview someone to really find out what it was that they did, what they liked doing, and learn more about the career and the path to have a great career. Mm-hmm. And, this is, sorry to say, mostly pre-internet days. I did have a class in college called the International Superhighway, where you were learning about the internet. And I was like, what? This is crazy. Like this thing isn't going to happen. I don't get it. But anyway, I was going through a book, and my textbooks all mentioned this public relations firm called Hill & Knowlton, which at the time was the world's #1 public relations firm. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, the naivety of youth, I was like, I'm just going to call the head of Hill & Knowlton and I'll just interview whoever the head is. I'll just ask. And so I did that. And he was, and a man in the Los Angeles office said, sure, I'd be happy to do this call. And he was a very nice man named Ron Hartwig. And he let me do the interview, let me ask questions, asked me a lot of questions. And then at the end of the interview for my project, he said, Melanie, if you ever find yourself in Los Angeles, you look me up. Well, fast forward to like 6 months later, I won a trip to Los Angeles. I had been working in retail and had a certain amount of sales and won a trip to LA. Uh-huh. And sure enough, I looked him up, which I'm sure he was just being nice, but yeah. I didn't know any better. And so I looked him up, and I think because I did that, he offered me a job on the spot. And so I picked up and moved to Los Angeles, and then started my first couple of jobs were actually in the entertainment industry. Uh-huh. And so as you can imagine, coming from Iowa, which is, kind of I love it, but it's really in the middle of nowhere, to Los Angeles. And my very first client was the Tournament of Roses. So doing the Rose Parade. Uh-huh. And I'm specifically working with the Grand Marshals, who that year were Shirley Temple Black, and Buzz Aldrin.
Oh, wow.
And Shirley Temple had been my mom's favorite actress growing up, and she had a Shirley Temple doll. And so she had introduced me to all the Shirley Temple movies. So I kind of immediately had this moment and called my mom and said, oh my gosh, Mom, I'm working with Shirley Temple. She's like, what? And it was this immediate kind of excitement around my move and job choice, even though they had been really worried about me and hesitant. And then my dad, he tried to be the first teacher in space, and we know how that ended.
Yeah. They didn't succeed.
Yeah. So he was not successful, which ended up probably being a good thing. But he loved the space program. And so when I told him I was working with Buzz Aldrin, he also said, okay, all right, you're in the right place. You're good. And so that's what started my career. And I really worked in the entertainment industry for a long time until I was pregnant with my son. Well, actually, it was after I had my son, which was 18 years ago. And I was brought back from maternity leave to work the Grammys. And this is a little TMI, but I think women will appreciate it. I was so busy and it was so daunting, and they required so much of me that I had been nursing at the time and I stopped being able to produce milk.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, okay, why am I doing this? This probably isn't going to be the industry that I'm going to be able to do and be a good mom and be the mom that I kind of want to be. And so luckily my agency at the time had a lot of travel clients too. And so I transitioned to the travel side. And now I've been doing PR for the travel industry for about almost 2 decades. So 18 years.
So how old were you when you moved to LA?
I was 22.
22 years old. Wow.
Yeah.
And how long did you work in the entertainment industry for?
So I worked in the entertainment industry for about 9 years.
9 years. And then,
yeah.
And that must have been a pivot there where it was like just an eye-opening experience where you were like this.
It was. I can say it was great in so many different ways. You learn a lot in that world very quickly. It was also a little unhealthy, I have to say, as a 20-something to be surrounded by everything that comes with the entertainment industry. So for reference, I'm about 5'4", and, at the time I was, like small, I cheered in college, but in that world and in Los Angeles, I was a giant.
Wow.
I felt like a giant next to people in the elevator. And there's something about in your 20s that's not like a great mindset to be in. And so, it was really nice to have my parents in Iowa. And when I would come home and if I would make little comments, they would really kind of shut me down and say, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's crazy. What you're talking about is crazy. And so it always kept me really mindful of where I had come from and that this little world that I was seeing was not real and was not a great version of reality. But it was really also kind of amazing, when my kids now, like my daughter is super into Leonardo DiCaprio. She's 15. But, I have stories of working with Leonardo DiCaprio. But more specifically, my first story with him was that I was at a Petco with my dog at the time, and he stopped me to pet my dog and just talk to me about how cute he was and whatever. And so she just that's mind blowing to her that it was just in these neighborhoods where you just would run into people like that just all the time.
That's kind of funny. My kids spend most of their teenage years pretending they don't know me. So the fact that your daughter is
so she does that with me too, but every once in a while she'll it's kind of like a hat trick. Like she'll pull out a card when her friends are around to say, "Hey mom, tell me that story again about this." And so that's how she uses it. So,
Well, that's cool. What do you think, Melanie, is the best investment that you made in yourself? Is there something that you can kind of look back at and be like, oh, I am so glad I did that. That really made my experience.
Yeah. So, in every step of my career, it really hasn't mattered from entry level to where I am now, is this belief in really listening and really trying to learn. I really believe that our entire lives, and this is personally and also professionally, are a work in progress. And I think one of the worst things that we can do is think that we have all of the answers and think that we know everything and pretend to know everything. Because when we do that, we miss opportunities to really listen and to learn and to grow and to become better. And very early on, even again, where I was essentially a glorified assistant or secretary, I took the time to really, if I was taking notes in a meeting, I was really listening to what was going on, trying to learn. If acronyms were being used that I didn't understand, I would look them up or ask someone. And just that idea that you never know everything. And that your job is to learn as much as you can and grow as much as you can and be really in control of that. It has been really pivotal in my growth as a human, but also as a professional. So, just investing in the time and the energy to recognize what you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that builds really good relationships too. Like a lot of people are more than willing to, like if anyone asked me about finance, I'd be more than happy to tell them. Their eyes would glaze over and they'd go to sleep. But you enjoy sharing those things that you're good at. That it's nice to have somebody curious about something that you're interested in too.
I think so too. And I think that when we act like maybe we're a little insecure and we act like we already know the answer, that we automatically sort of shut ourselves off. Because then people are like, oh, this person doesn't want to know. Or this person thinks that they know, so I'll just let them think that they know, And I've had that experience with some younger people that I've worked with, who are really just starting. And, often I've sat them down and said, hey, you don't need to know all the answers. Like, ask questions. Everyone says ask questions, but I really mean it. Ask questions, because that's really the only way you're going to get better. And I want you to be better, because then you're going to be better for me too, as a teammate.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea. And I still follow that too, even in the reverse order. Like, I can't use a remote control to save my life, but all of the younger women in my office know how to do. They were born and bred on tech. And so I'll ask them I'm going to tell you a secret. I ask them how I post on Facebook or how I can make Instagram work for me or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or with me, that's a huge part of my job. And so, but I'm of the same generation. And so like, I've also just learned, okay, what apps are you using? Because there are so many tools that exist to make you look amazing, but you're not actually doing a lot of the work yourself. But I can tell you, for the remote control, like the streaming stuff, I can't find the shows that I'm looking for. They don't show up.
I've resulted too. I push this button. It's Alexa button on my remote control. And I'm like, Alexa, please help me find.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, technology is incredible. And that's another thing that it's only going to continue to change and only get faster and faster and faster. And I think sometimes we hit a point where we just are like, no, I like it where it is right now. And this is where I'm going to stop and stay. But that's just not how it works. And so, it's a good lesson for us to to adapt to anything. Yeah. That the second that we stop, then we're stuck.
Yeah. You don't go.
We're not moving forward.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like the idea of curiosity, that doesn't stop when you turn 30 or 40 or 50. You need to continually cultivate that idea of curiosity and asking questions and learning what you don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you a good example of that. So one trip that I was hosting media and influencers in, now this place is really off limits, but it was formerly called Burma, and then it became Myanmar. And now there's genocide happening there, which is really unfortunate. But at the time, they were just opening their borders to tourism. And so I took a group of media and influencers there. And it was a 10-day trip. And for 6 of the days, we had no internet and no phone service. And it was so funny because it's this group of really naturally curious people. And we would be talking and we would say, oh, and I think this is the stat, or when maybe we'd be referencing an actor or a book and we couldn't think of it. And it's amazing how many times you go to your phone to look up the answer, but when you don't have it, we couldn't look it up. And so we created a notebook and we started writing down every question that we had come up with or that we didn't have the answer to. And it filled pages and pages. And as soon as we got internet access again, we all were looking up the answers. But it's amazing how much we have at our disposal to learn. And, back in the day, you'd actually have to wait for maybe a new encyclopedia to come out.
Oh, I know.
To learn something new. But it's just, that's the incredible side of technology, is if you're curious, you can find the answer and you can learn immediately.
Yeah. I remember one time me and my husband were having really, really early on, we're having a argument over something in biology, and we were pulling textbooks off the shelf to, prove our points. And it's just, now all you have to do is Google it.
It's amazing. And I mean, something to be embraced for sure.
Yeah.
Especially for curious people, but I do think that sometimes, like I found with my kids, I worry that they're not naturally curious, but maybe it's just because they've grown up being able to access the answers.
Yeah. They get the answers a lot quicker than we do. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think natural curiosity and continuing to be curious makes you a more interesting person too, because you, like I always say, I know a little about a lot. Like I don't know a lot about a lot, but I know a little about just about everything.
Yeah. I love that. And that's kind of the way I live my life too. So I can really identify with that. What do you think is the worst advice someone gave you? And did you take it? Did you not take it? Did you learn from it?
Yeah. So back in my first job, when I moved to Los Angeles, I had a female boss who, I was in a cubicle. And so I was like essentially a glorified assistant. And I was in a cubicle and I would catch her in my cubicle writing emails to the company about how awesome she was from me. And I remember asking her about it, like kind of building up the courage to ask her and say like, hey, like I'd be happy to write something so that you don't have to. And she's like, no, you shouldn't do that. Women have had it really hard and don't support other women because they're not going to support you. And I don't know how she kind of validated that she would write these emails on behalf of me, but then wouldn't look to me to actually assist. I think she just didn't want to owe me anything. And it wasn't necessarily advice, but it was feedback that I thought, I am not going to follow that. And, if I'm at a point in my career, I think at the time she was probably in her mid 40s. I'm not really sure. But if I'm at that point in my career and I feel that I need to pretend that my assistant is writing emails about how great I am, then something's gone wrong. And so, I've just really worked to understand that we validate ourselves. We don't, if we're looking for validation from other people, then we're probably going to be disappointed. But also, let's make sure that we pay it forward and and give other people that boost of confidence or that pat on the back or that validation that they might be looking for. So it's kind of this catch-22. Maybe don't expect it yourself, but make sure that you pay it forward to other people.
Yeah, because they do need that. And I found that I have a little note somewhere on my desk where one of my assistants just wrote me a note while I was out on vacation saying something about, you're just amazing. We appreciate I appreciate you so much. And I've kept it for 6 months because that just means so much and if you pay that forward, if you can help be that validation for someone else.
Well, we all love hearing someone say something nice to us, and we shouldn't wait around for it and instead should make sure that we say it to other people. It's even in little everyday things, like if someone says, hey, you like, I love your haircut, like a stranger, or I love your jeans, they look so great, or whatever it is, it makes you feel better. And so if you can do that to other people, there's no downside to that. And if you can see a great reaction, then great. The other side note to that is assistants run the world. And so I am always amazed, and this was very true in the entertainment industry. People would treat assistants very, very poorly, but they are running everything. And so treat assistants the way that you would treat their bosses or better.
Yeah.
And the results are going to be a lot better and you're going to feel a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And we were just talking a little bit about that idea of her telling you that women aren't going to have your back.
Yeah.
And I found that dynamic has changed a little bit, or at least I feel like it's changed. I feel like I owe a debt of gratitude to those that are 20 years ahead of me on the path and kind of broke ground. But I feel like as women in the community, we really are more supportive. But did you run into those mean girls?
Yeah. For me, it was less about mean girls and it was more about women trying very desperately to not be seen as women, because that would somehow be viewed as a weakness. And maybe that was just my version of it, but I don't think so. And I'll give you a story. I was pregnant with my son, and I was working at a public relations agency in Los Angeles, and we were pitching new business, and the new business was based in Boston, and it was a financial firm. And my boss, who was also a woman, a successful, like she ran the office and also had children, so she was a working mother as well. She said, "Don't tell them you're pregnant, because I don't want them to know that you won't be there for a period of time after you have the baby. So don't tell them you're pregnant." And I think just by even doing that and not just being forthcoming about it, and just, it somehow made me feel like I had done something wrong, or that I was doing something wrong, or that, and it set them up to think that then I was doing something wrong. And so, I think there was, and I really hope it's continued to shift and change, but just this idea that, I know that I wanted to be a vice president by the time I was 29, because in my brain, I wanted to then have children in my 30s. And if I wasn't a vice president by the time I had children, I would never become one. And so I pushed and pushed and pushed, became one. And then I was like, okay, now like I know that I've at least hit this level regardless of what happens after I have children. And unfortunately, I still kind of think that that's true. Like we feel this pressure or this need to be as far along as we can before we have kids, because once we have kids, we're going to somehow be held back. And so the mean girl thing is, I know, different, but I think it's a little bit of a view of weakness in a professional environment, especially one like mine, where you're expected to work nights or weekends or go on trips that take you away from home. The belief is that once you become a mom, you're not going to do that. And I would go on trips with clients and with media and influencers, and so would a male counterpart. And, they might be a parent as well, but they were never asked, who's taking care of your kids while you're gone? But I was always asked, who's taking care of your kids while you're gone? So I think we've made great strides. But in my mind, if women can continue to support women by making that a non-issue, even women that don't have children, is making sure that they're supporting those who do in the workplace, to say, no, this person's very much focused on work. Probably more focused on work because they're working really hard to be extremely efficient to get the work done. And then go home and do their job there. Like, it's just this, I think that there's still a little bit of a stigma, and maybe it's just in my industry, where you can't be a great mom and a great worker. I just think it looks a little different. And we shouldn't penalize or assume that one is dependent on the other. And, it's really up to me and how I balance that. It's really not up to anyone else, as long as the job is getting done. And so, I think that that's something that we can continue to work on, and women can really lead the narrative on. That, am I getting my work done? Am I doing it well? And does that mean that maybe I'm not going out for drinks with people afterwards? Sure. But I'm doing the work while I'm there. And isn't that what we're being paid for?
Yeah. I find that really interesting. I don't think it was just in your industry. I remember, 10, 11 years ago when I first started, I had on the website that I had 5 kids and talked a little bit in my bio about my 5 kids. And I remember distinctly going in and talking to the marketing person, and I'm like, let's take that out, because I didn't want to be seen.
Because you feel apologetic about it, or that it's somehow seen that maybe you're not going to be focusing enough on your clients, and instead are going to be distracted by what's going on at home. And while that might absolutely be true, the chances are that no one's going to recognize any difference in the quality of work that you present. And it's really up to you to manage that. It's not up to other people.
Yeah, that is a really good point. And I find that interesting. I wonder if there's Do you have ideas for like how to change that? Is there things that you've seen that have worked well?
I mean, I think it's about just somehow, if I had the answer to this, I think that I would be very, very successful. But I think it really just comes down to a recognition of, we talk a lot about equality. Mm-hmm. And we know that there's inequality in everything. It might be that inequality in salary. It might be inequality in the glass ceiling or whatever. But if we can, at a minimum, just keep the conversation equal, it's kind of like what they've talked about on the red carpet, where women get asked what designer they're wearing and men get asked about their career, right? Mm-hmm. Just being a little more thoughtful about the questions that we're asking each. If you want to ask the man who's on the trip, who's watching their kids while they're gone, okay, then you can ask the woman. But it's just a little bit more thoughtful about how you're respecting gender equality in subjects that have nothing to do with work. And frankly, it would be great if we just kept focused on the work, period. And then when we have really personal relationships with people and friendships with people, which we know that we do in the workplace, then those conversations are different, Yeah. But I just think that we're doing a disservice to, there are dads in this world that take on the main responsibility at home too. Yeah. And, we're just doing a disservice when we're mixing the two and thinking that one has an impact on the other that's our business. Of course they do, but it's up to the person. You trust the person to manage it unless it becomes a problem. Yeah.
That's a good point. I like the idea of talking about equality in our speech and the way that we ask questions, the way that
Yeah. And I think that's different than, I think sometimes people are a little fatigued on being politically correct. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's about being politically correct. I think it's just about being a little more thoughtful.
Yeah. Yeah.
About what you're asking or what you're insinuating or what your assumptions might be.
Yeah. I like that. And I'm probably guilty of it just as much as everybody else.
Yeah. And I think we all are. And it's because we just haven't quite gotten there where we're actually, everyone kind of speaks to these things, but we don't actually live these things. And so it's finding a way to make sure that we're really being conscious of our perceptions.
So, Mel, what is a regret? If you look back on, where you've been in your careers, is there something you wish you would have done differently? Or if you could go back and do it again, you definitely would do it differently?
Well, I mean, the thing I just cited about the boss who told me not to tell the client I was pregnant, I would do that differently because I can tell you that I had to be on a conference call when I was in labor, pretending that I wasn't in labor. So
yeah, 100%.
That was a thing. I know it's a little bit of a cop out, but I actually don't think that it is. That I tend to think that focusing on regrets is a little bit of a waste of time. And instead, we just focus on the idea that we are always a work in progress. And what can we learn from something that we wish would have done differently? Yeah. And, in that situation, I would never, what I probably learned from that is I would never put another female coworker or male coworker, maybe who was leaving to, be with his wife while in labor or something. I would never put a coworker in that position to feel like they couldn't be honest about something. Because I just don't think, I think transparency is really, really important in pretty much every aspect of our lives. And when we believe that we have to hide something, whatever it is, we are not serving ourselves.
Yeah.
And so transparency and honesty and just being unapologetic about that is, I think, important. So, again, it's a little bit of a regret, but more than that, it's a learning opportunity of never wanting to put someone else in that position or never allowing myself to be put in a position where I'm unable to be honest.
Yeah, I like that idea. I've really thought about, authentic was the word of the year last year, so that idea of being true to yourself and bringing your whole person to work, and then making it safe for others to do that. Because a lot of times we're now in the position of supervisor or president or owner, and we have the ability to change the way that things have been done in the past.
That's right. That's right. And, and again, recognizing that there's a distinct line between what someone is producing at work and what they might be going through at home. And being a little kinder in recognizing that one, while it's impacting them, it is likely not impacting you. And so leave them separate and support on one side and then validate maybe on the other side.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way of looking at things. So if you could head back and talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell her?
I would, my 20-year-old self needs so much advice. But the main thing that I would say is the same risks that took me from Iowa to Los Angeles are risks that you should be willing to take throughout your life and career. Like having fear is an incredible motivator. And if you're not a little scared of something, then you're probably not pushing yourself and you're probably not serving yourself. And so embrace fear and take risks.
Yeah, I love that. I feel that's like my message to the world. Do it scared. The idea of fearless females as the podcast name is not being without fear, but doing it even if you are scared.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, if you're not a little scared about something, what is the point? Like because then you're just sitting in comfort at all times. And while comfort is incredible, it is not a motivator. And so whether it's having a conversation with your child that might, the birds and the bees types of conversations with your child. Like I am very, very honest with my kids too, and it's scary and it's uncomfortable. But I'm not serving them if I'm not willing to be the person that they can talk to and that I can bring up subjects that are kind of scary. And that's true about, whether it's, moving or starting a different job or, I don't know, jumping moving your kids to a different school. I mean, there's fear in everything that is worthwhile and that serves us. And recognizing that being fearful or taking risks is not reckless if you're doing it responsibly.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of if you're not a little bit afraid, you're probably not doing it right.
Yeah. You're not pushing yourself. You're not growing. You're not, and it might even just be as simple as talking to a boss about a project that you're really interested in that you don't think that you're qualified for, but you'd love to do. Like it doesn't have to be a major job change or a career change. It could be as simple as trying to get involved in something at work that you're really interested in.
Yeah. Or asking for a raise.
Yeah. Oh, that can be terrifying. And yet that's one of those things that other people aren't going to probably come to you and say, hey, I really want to pay you more. But they absolutely see your value and they're just waiting for you to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that I push a lot and that I've seen as kind of a theme throughout these different interviews and different talks is ask, what are they going to say no?
Yeah. Well, and if they do say no, then is it the right place for you? And are you being valued in the way that you want to be valued? I mean, so you also have to be prepared for the answer and be okay with it. I interviewed for a job a couple of years ago that would have been kind of a step in a different direction. And it was scary and it was something that made me feel uncomfortable, but was also exciting. And I was, really interested in it. And I was offered the position, but it required me to be in the office every day. And at the time I was going through something that wouldn't have worked for my life and what I needed to do. And so I said, this is great. I'm so excited, but I can't be in the office every day. And here's why I don't think that should be a barrier. And they said, too bad, that's inflexible. And so I had to be willing to stand up for myself and be like, okay, then I'm walking away from that. And what they did then on the other side is they hired me as a consultant to do some work. So, I mean, it still presented itself in a way that worked for me. It just was a little different than what I thought I wanted. And I would have been miserable had I taken it and not stood for what I needed to. Also, you learn from people's inflexibility. If you're with people that are extremely inflexible and you're just looking for some, like bandwidth and be able to kind of ebb and flow with something, then it's not the right fit. So you always just have to be honest with yourself too.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Sometimes someone put it as like, they're not your tribe, find your tribe. So you're not only interviewing for that position or that change or something like that, but they're interviewing you too.
Yeah, it goes both ways. Like, you can't want it at the cost of what you need. You have to, if they really want you, then they're willing to find some middle ground. And when people aren't willing to find middle ground, then to your point, there might not be your tribe. They might not be the right fit for you. And, I think we tend to, that is scary too, to walk away from something that we think that we want.
Yeah.
But what's the cost?
So what about unique challenges because you were a woman? I know that you talked a little bit about your milk drying up when you were in that really stressful situation. Is that your unique challenge, or did you have something else that struck you?
I think not necessarily. I think it's something that I've already brought up, which is the challenge of fighting against perception. And it's that once you have a family, that you're not going to want to do these things that your job requires. And that's just wasn't the case for me. It might be the case for other people, but it's just, so maybe my challenge in looking at it slightly differently is managing my ambition with my interest in being a great mom. So it's that idea that I've always wanted to continue to push myself and to grow and to become better at my job, but also grow with my job and grow with responsibility. And then recognizing that ambition sometimes works directly in the face of what being a great mom requires, and finding the balance and being okay with the balance. People always think it's like 50-50. It's never 50-50. But it's, sometimes the scale goes towards the job, and sometimes the scale goes towards home. And so at the end, you maybe want it to be 50-50, like when all is said and done, but on a day-to-day basis, it is never 50-50.
Yeah, I agree with you. Is there anything that you found that helped you to find that balance? Was it just staying flexible? Like, what did you do?
Well, so for me, I recognize that this is a little bit of a luxury that a lot of people don't have. And that is that I have been remote for 14 years, way earlier than it was popular after the pandemic. And so, and in that, it was I have found, and I think probably a lot of people now that are working remote or have done it for the first time find, is that it's not that you're not doing the work. It's the opposite. It's that maybe you're not creating boundaries around when to stop, because you're at home and your computer is right there and it's in your face. And so I learned to manage, like, okay, well, these are my hours that I'm going to focus entirely on work. And then I'm going to close my computer at this normal closing time. But if I've let life, or something like if I've gone to the elementary school back in the day and done something for 2 hours, then I'll throw 2 hours onto my day when the kids go to bed. So it was always just being mindful of the fact that hours, like, is the work getting done, and does it really matter what your hours are?
Yeah. That's a theme also that's kind of permeated. It's just that this environment where you're trying to be a caretaker of any sort, whether it's a mom or pets or, parent, that idea of flexibility is really important in our world.
It is. It's really important, and it gets in the way of people have this. So it used to be back in the day, you would go, let's say you were working in the office, and if your boss was a smoker, then maybe you might pick up smoking just to schmooze with them at the times when they were outside, right? And so now we're looking for connections in different ways. And it's finding the right times to connect, but also finding the right times to disconnect. Because I don't want to become a smoker just because my boss is a smoker. I don't want to be on the computer all hours of the night. If a client is on the computer all hours of the night, I need to find the right thing that works for me and then leave the rest to fate or just to perception.
Yeah. Set those boundaries. I love that. What, Melanie, what's the thing you're most proud of?
What is the thing I'm most proud of? I am really proud of, and I sound like a little bit of a broken record here, but I'm really proud of the idea that I've never just, I guess, rested on my laurels, or, that idea that I do believe that we're always sort of under construction, and maybe just when we take our last breath, the construction site closes finally. But just this idea that we never have the answers, all of the answers. We never are done learning and growing and being a better person, being a better human. And so just not holding myself to that impossible standard is something I'm proud of. Like it's that idea that I don't think that I know everything, and I don't think that I have all the answers, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I love it. I do. I love learning. It's probably one of my top things. So that idea of curiosity and growing, it really strikes a chord with me.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's going to be what makes us happier as we even get older, because, sometimes I have found, maybe this was with my grandparents' generation, that they kind of hit a certain point where they were like, I'm done. Like, I've done it. I'm done, and I hope that I never hit that point.
Mm-hmm. That it's always a work in progress, always a construction site. I like that. So any advice, if you could talk to someone who is just starting down the path that you're already been so successfully down, what advice would you give?
Some of that advice that I would have given myself as a 20-something, listen, ask questions, take risks. Sometimes I think that it's really scary when you're starting. You kind of feel like, okay, I've got to have the money, I've got to get the apartment, or I've got to get married, or whatever it is that you think is your goal. And then everything becomes riskier after that. So if you've gotten this great apartment with this great view that has this high rent, you get a little stuck by the idea that, okay, I have all of this responsibility now. And the truth is, when you're getting started, you have the least amount of responsibility that you will ever have. And so if you can just release yourself from that responsibility, I think you're going to find that you will take risks and twists and turns that will really serve you. But when we feel really saddled by that responsibility, we tend to kind of lock down and get scared, and not the good kind of scared.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like that. It sounds like be fearless.
Yeah, be fearless. Well, to your podcast point, be fearless. But really, I mean, truly, it's the truth. In your 20s, you have the least amount of responsibility. So take the biggest risks.
Take the biggest risks. Absolutely. 100%. So,
yeah.
Well, Melanie, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it. If our listeners want to know more about you and all the cool things that you've done, where can they go?
So I do have a little website called, or it's just www.eda-pr.com. But also feel free to email me if you're looking for any advice, and I'll give you the short version of that. Address is just mel@eda-pr.com. I'm happy to talk with anyone or answer any questions.
Thank you so much. It's just been wonderful to just hear how your journey's gone and just get the benefit of your insight over the years. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.